Hi, my name's Benji Davies and this is my picture book, Tad. Tad was started from a drawing that I did some time ago, about 8 years ago. I created a picture which was very similar to what is now on the cover of the book, and it was a little frog sitting on a leaf staring at the moon. And actually what I did was I used a very similar version of that one, which was with this pink sky, so that it looked more like that in the original picture, although the frog was slightly different, but it was essentially the same image as we have there, and decided to use that for the cover. So I did that quite a long time ago, and then I tried writing a story, and actually I'd just written my first book at that point, The Storm Whale, and I was thinking, what could I do with this frog? What could this frog's story be? And I really wasn't sure at all. And I did try writing one version of a story for that frog, and it didn't really come to anything. And then I actually was in the middle of writing Grandad's Island, my second book, and so I wrote that instead. And so I put this picture to one side, put it on the back burner, and I thought that maybe one day in the future I would come up with a story for the frog. And then so fast forward a few years later, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was doing some sketching, and I sketched this little tadpole in a pond peeping up above the water, and I put next to it, Tad was a frog. Well, that's not quite true. He was almost a frog. And that seemed to me like the beginning of a story. It was an introduction to a character. And so at some point that year, I just took that sentence and I started to write the rest of that story. And amazingly, often books take quite a long time to write and to formulate the ideas, but that one, somehow, I think I've been storing up for so long that somehow it just all came together quite quickly, and I wrote the whole story, which then had to be edited down, but I wrote the whole story, I would say, in a few hours. But obviously it took many years for it to come together, and so yeah, that was how I came up with the story for Tad. And I was also thinking about things like how when children are very small, how they use picture books, I think, as a kind of roadmap for perhaps their emotions, their feelings, their experiences. Picture books can kind of help show the way. When you're very small and the world is very big, there's so much to learn and so much to know, and there are also things to fear, I suppose, as well. So that is really what Tad is about. Tad is about a little tiny tadpole who grows and who is a little bit behind the rest of her tad brothers and tad sisters. And what she really needs to do is to grow up and become a frog, but she doesn't know that. So really that is what this journey is for this frog, Tad. And so that was the other thing, is that the frog became a girl in this book, because the original sketch that I did was a boy, and it just seemed to me that it should be a girl. I thought that would be rather nice. So what I'll do is I'm going to read to you the beginning of this book. First of all, I'll show you these. These are the end papers. The end papers. And on the end papers, I decided to take the reader under the surface of the pond, in between the weeds and the reeds. There's a couple of little pond snails in there as well, to show you all of these white bubbly shapes with little black dots in them. So if you've ever been pond dipping in the spring, you'll know that that is frog spawn. As we turn the page, we see here is Tad. She's the last of her tad brothers and tad sisters to hatch. We turn the next page and we see that she's swimming out from those reeds and weeds. And it says, Tad was a frog. Well, that's not quite true. She was almost a frog. Tad was small, smaller than her tad brothers, smaller than her tad sisters. Tad was the smallest, almost a frog, in the whole wide pond. She was so small that she had to wiggle her tail twice as fast as any of the others, just to keep up. Keep up, they would say, or Big Blub will get you. Tad had never seen Big Blub. Big Blub, they said, was a great, big, nasty fish. Big Blub swam in the deep, dark, murky part of the pond. He was as old as the mud, they said. He would wait till the sun went in, till all the pond was grey. Then he would glide out from the dark patches and gulp. No, Tad did not want to know. She decided to not believe in Big Blub. But just in case, she kept to the shallow, sunny parts of the pond where Big Blub could not get her. And when the sun went in, she carefully hid behind the rocks and plants in hope that Big Blub would not find her. Day by day, the tadpoles grew. They grew back legs, then front legs. They grew webbed toes. Their legs grew longer. Their legs grew stronger. Stretching their forelegs as wide as they could, they felt like they wanted to climb out of the pond. They rushed into the shallow water quicker than you or I can blink. Swoosh, wiggle, swish, swish, wiggle, swoosh. Their tails got smaller and smaller until they no longer had tails at all. We've lost our tails! We've lost our tails! They cheered. All except for Tad. I think we'll leave it there. I hope you enjoy reading my book, and also you should make sure you get out there, go and have a look in some ponds out in the wild and see if you can find any tadpoles who are turning into frogs.